All right, all right. Here we are, Cindy. We're going to talk about the Woodshed Part 2. And so this parental exercise, guys, is so important for your children. You know, in the Bible, it actually talks about how if we do not correct our children, it says this in the book of Proverbs, we do not love our children.
Right.
And there's a lot of parents that talk about, oh, I love my kids, I love my kids. But if you never correct your kids, then it doesn't matter what you say out of your mouth, because that's not what, is actual. That is, it's what we do becomes the actual. And so we have to be able to correct our kids, and not just correct our kids, but correct them properly. And so you can correct your kids wrongly, and it's not showing love for the child. And so we want to be able to correct our children properly to show our love for the child. And look, if you not watch part 1, you need to go back and do that, because we establish a tremendous philosophy of parenting in that session with going to the woodshed. And going to the woodshed means bringing someone for correction.
Right.
So the first thing I want to talk about today, Cindy, is when you talk about whipping, and we're going to get to the how-tos today. We're going to do that. But the first thing I want you to understand when it comes to correcting or whipping the kid is the first thing we have is you want to have first-time obedience. And why is this?
Okay, so first-time obedience is extremely important because if you do not hold your child to first-time obedience, you are actually training them to sin. Because think about it, when the Lord speaks a command to you, tells you to do something, it's important. Obedience is first time. Okay, so if I allow my kid to disobey me over and over, I'm going to count to 10 and you let them go on, you are training them, you're setting them up to sin later in life. Because actually, by them disobeying you, they're disobeying the Father. And then also, it brings about frustration on the parent. It can even lead into anger, because think about it. If you have to tell your child 10 times to stop doing something, what happens? It just elevates. It elevates. And then by the time you can become angry, and we never want to correct out of anger.
And remember this, too. In first-time obedience, you have to be clear in your communication.
Exactly.
And the best way to be clear in your communication is whatever you're telling your child. Let's say, Nathan, I want you to go and clean your room. And when I say clean your room, that means I want everything picked up off the floor. I don't want no, dirt on the floor. I want everything hung up. I want the bed made. You're very clear in your expectation of what you're asking them. And then you ask the child to say that back to you. And this way, you two are completely clear on what's going on. And here's a great time, too, parents, where you can actually set a timer where you give them not only the expectation and you clear and they understand it, but then you can say, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 20 minutes to get all this done. So put a timer on your phone. I'm going to put one on my phone. And in 20 minutes, I'm going to come back and you need to be completed with this. Do you understand that? And when they say, yes, I understand that, then you have set that child up for success, and all the communication is clear. So now you're poised to have first-time obedience. So if that doesn't happen, then you're going to begin to walk into the steps of chastisement, because that has been made clear. Cindy?
And so by making sure your child looks at you and then agrees to obey. And so if they look at you and they say, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, and then they disobey, it's outright disobeying.
So first-time obedience is very important. It keeps down the frustration. It keeps you from going in anger. It trains them to be obedient to first time, and which is going to be very important in their life for their boss that they're going to have in school, with God, when God's speaking to them. If we can all learn to obey from the beginning, it's going to help us in life tremendously.
And I think something that will help you too, don't tell your child to do something if you really don't care if they don't do it. I think a lot of times we'll fall into, hey, do this. And then if they don't do it, you're kind of like, well, I don't care. Your child doesn't know that. So make sure when you ask them to do something or tell them to do something that you're going to hold up your end of the deal.
And that's that petty stuff that
Right.
you want to stay away from. You want to be, very specific of your expectations and what you're asking, get the response back, get the agreement from both of you, and then move forward. It takes a little time. Look, good communication takes a little time, but that little time is going to set both of you up for success in being able to move forward. Now, what happens is if the kid does not follow through, it's not, okay, I'm giving you another 20 minutes. No, okay, you bring them to be chastised. And that's what we want to get into, the nuts and bolts of chastising right now. So first thing we want to talk about when we're having to do this is the instrument of what you're going to use to chastise with. And that can vary depending on the severity of, the chastisement. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But, first of all, for a child that is 12 years old and younger, then the tool of your correction, I would suggest to be a piece of leather. What we use, Cindy, when we're coming up with our kids and raising up our kids, we used a piece of leather that we glued two pieces together. Now, why that's important, if you just use a belt, it's too flimsy and it's not easily controlled. You can hit your child in wrong places. It can also, when you hit in the wrong place, it can swing around. It can leave marks because of whipping around and hitting. And so it's not really good to just use a belt. And it's not really good to use, a stick.
A wooden spoon.
A wooden spoon or something like that. Because what can happen is it's too hard and you can bruise. So the best thing we have found is two pieces of leather glued together about 1/8 inch. Actually, we used a piece off of a saddle. And yes.
Yeah, and so the point is you want to administer pain without administering injury.
Yeah, and so you use this, and this is going to be able to do that where it's painful,
Right.
it stings, but it's not injury. And so
Right.
you want to, the instrument is very important. And so that's if it's time for a whipping. But there's also other tools of correction. It could be, loss of freedom.
Right.
And so because, it depends on, I guess we can go over that right now. The punishment has to fit the crime.
Right.
And so we need to make sure that whatever they did, it's, and you determine what that is. We're not going to tell you what that is. You need to determine what that is. Let's say if they didn't clean the room, you gave them 20 minutes, they didn't do that. It could be, if it's a 12 and under, it could be, hey, I'm going to whip you because that's what I feel the punishment needs to be. But you don't bring them back in the room and waylay on them for something like not cleaning their room. A lot of times something like that for us, and I'm just giving you our experience, would be like 3 licks. And that would be 3 licks, but it's 3 licks that they feel and that stings, and we're using the proper tool to be able to do that. But if you have something like where, you told them, not to run and they ran, 2 things can happen there. A tool can be, hey, you've lost your freedom now. If you're a little kid, you're going to have to sit with me now.
You have to sit in the shopping cart now.
That's right. You're not going to be able to walk outside
Yeah.
the shopping cart. You're going to have to sit in the shopping cart. That's a tool of correction because it's a loss of freedom.
And one thing, in determining that, you look at, okay, is my child being characterized by this? And that helps you decide, what's the punishment that's going to fit this crime, Are they characterized by this? Because, again, like in the last video, we said you want to be as gentle as possible, but as firm as necessary because you want them to really learn.
So, and so you're thinking through all this, and that's why I had this video. You can watch it over and over again to really get some of these things down. And so if they're not characterized by, getting outside of that freedom zone, or let's say not even, they normally clean their room. If they're not characterized by that and all of a sudden they didn't clean their room, then that may just be a sit down conversation, which is
A
also
warning,
correction,
right.
where we sit down and I would say, hey, what went on? This isn't like you, because it may be they're going through something,
Right.
something distracted them, and so all of that has to come in play when you're talking about correction. So it can be loss of freedom. It can be using the instrument in this tool that we're describing that administers pain, but it can also be pain that is administered by withholding something. Let's say, the room where you decide that, hey, since you didn't clean your room, I'm going to take your gaming system, and you're not going to have your gaming system for 2 days. Or I'm going to hold your gaming system, for 3 days. Whatever you decide as a parent, because that also is correction. And then also another form and another tool of correction is when it's a natural consequence. Let's say that
Right.
kid that you told to stay by the buggy does not stay by the buggy, and they take off running, and you told them, stay by the buggy, don't run, walk in the store, they take off running, they trip, they fall, they skin their knee, and they're crying because they're in pain of skinning their knee, then that is a natural consequence. Many times, we've had that happen with our kids in different situations. Then we'll go to them and say, we'll pick them up, we'll say, hey, it's going to be okay, but we say, now look, that pain you're feeling is a natural consequence of really God's correction to you because you didn't obey us.
And I always give my kids the opportunity to figure it out, so I'll ask them, okay, why do you think this happened? And they know. I mean, the Holy Spirit is working on them, and so it allows them to be able to think. So then next time, it's right here, and then maybe they won't do it.
So you have all those tools for correction, and then also you got to determine when you're correcting and using these tools, and we're going to get to the whip because everybody's like, okay, what do I do with the whip? What do I do with the whip? Okay, listen, don't be that excited about the whip, right? And so, but we're going to get to the when you use the whip, how you use the whip. But first of all, you also need to understand the difference between childishness and foolishness.
Right.
Because sometimes a kid is just being a kid. And as parents, you both have to make a determination on that. Let's say, if there's a glass of water on the table and your kid's kind of rambunctious a little bit and they're just kind of fooling around, they knock the glass off the table, it falls on the ground, it breaks, glass goes everywhere, milk goes all over the floor. You can't look at that as, okay, that's foolishness. They're being foolish, and and then correct them that way, because really that, let's say, 5-year-old was just being a kid and they made a mistake.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean you don't correct them, but it changes what the correction is.
They will clean up the milk.
Yeah, they'll clean up the milk for sure.
They learn.
And then you help them clean up the glass without cutting themselves. But then you can go, okay, look, that's a good learning time. That's a good explaining this. Mm-hmm. Now, if they turn around and do it again, then you're moving into this, you being, foolish here. Or if it's a vase and someone's in a neighbor's house and you've told them not to run and they run anyway, well, that's foolishness. But if you go in a neighbor's house and the kid's just walking along by the vase and accidentally knocks it over because they're a kid and they're not paying attention, then that's childishness. And so those two need to be handled differently. And this is, as a parent, why you have to make these determinations. And you have to know what is childishness, what is foolishness. Even if it was an accident in childishness, the kid would have to pay for the vase in that case.
Right, and that's biblical, that's restitution.
That's right, that's restitution. But if the kid, was running when we told him not to run and broke the vase, not only would they have to pay for the vase, but also they would be corrected, in that case, probably with a whipping for us, depending on the age. And that's another thing I want to bring up. Age specific. And so 12 and under, we will use corporal punishment. Corporal punishment meaning whipping on the bottom, okay? We'll use corporal punishment for 12 and under, all the way down to 9 months old. I'm going to let you explain that in a minute, how early you start with correcting a kid. But we will use that. But once they turn 13, and we actually joke about it at the house, said, they'll be almost 13, like 12 and a half. And I go, man, I only have 6 months to whip you. And we'll make a joke of it, and we're all laughing. But once they turn 13, there's no more whippings with the strap, if you will. There's no more whippings with that anymore. So any correction after 13 is going to have to be loss of freedom, loss of material things, things of that nature, correction, all of that kind of stuff is going to have to come into play. And hopefully if you've done a good job when they're young, you don't have a problem when they get older. But I want you to talk about how early you start with corporal punishment.
Right. So just a few instances I want to cover. When your child's about 9 months old, their little personality really starts to explode and blossom. And I've had several strong-willed children. And so, little things like you're trying to change a child's diaper, they're squirming, they're wanting to pitch a fit, they're wanting to flip over, that gentle putting them back. And, in that case, I'd put them back and say, no, be still. Mommy says, be still, and keep showing the child, no, be still. There are some instances when you've done that, a little firm squeeze in their inner thigh to let them know, no, the word no. And I even start saying the word no younger than that, so they're kind of understanding, they get it, okay? When they, we had one try to reach for the fireplace, that would be a little pop on the hand to let them know, hey, you don't reach for the fire, it will hurt you.
Now, let me say this about, when all of them around 9 months old, they start really understanding no because you train them properly. And you actually start as soon as they're babies, setting schedules with them and everything else. And that would probably be another video you might want to do by yourself for moms. Call it a mom's video. Maybe that'd be the next one you can come do by yourself because I'm not a mom. And just help really early. But every single kid, all 8 of our kids, when they were, that age, at that age, and they reached their hands out, and we would tell them no. And when we got to that point, we'd actually set it up sometimes where it'd say they're reaching for the electric socket. We'd say no. And so they'd reach for it. And so we'd do the first pop of their life. And I don't use my hand, we'll use the instrument. Because you want your hand to be used for love. You want your hand to be used for bringing them in. And so use the strap, if you will, for the instrument. So the strap is correction, my hand is for bringing you in. Very important note to make. And it takes time. So I'll go get the strap and we'll set up this scenario many times for training. And when they reach out and you tell them no, take the strap and just tap it on the hand. You're not going to break their hand. You're not hitting them like, wow. Don't be, child abusers. But you actually taking it, you tapping the hand so they feel it. And you could try it on yourself to see how much. And so what happens is every single one of them, they stop and they go, oh. And they look at their hand and they look at you and they're like, what in the world just happened? And every one of them did this. Every one of them, they went and they looked and they were like, and they thought for a second and they reached back out again without crying. None of them cried with the first slap. And they reach back out again. And when they reach back out again, you tap it again where they feel it a little bit harder that time. And every one of them, ah! And the next time they go, and when you go no, they go, they will pull it back. It works every time. And if you do your job early, at those early ages, to be honest with you, we rarely whipped our children past 2 years old. I mean, it was a rare occasion that we had to whip a child past 2 years old. Maybe once here, once there, and then for sure past 7, 8. I mean, hardly never. We had one
with the
kid.
Exception of the little strong-willed ones.
Yeah, we had an exception, but not even a lot. Just one hand. I mean, I could count it on one hand. And so when you do it early, it's so much better. Well, some of you parents are like, well, wow, my kid's already 10. I've not done any of that. Well, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, but you can do it. Now, I want to move into the dignity of when you whip a child. This is very important. You always want, in correction, if you're going to go to that level where you're going to talk to them or you're going to whip them, you need to bring them in a room by themselves. I'll say, this is, you want to keep the dignity of the child. So we would never whip our children in front of the other children.
Right.
We would say, hey, let's say the room, go back to the room. They didn't clean the room. I'm determined as a parent, this is going to be a whipping. We clearly communicated. We understood you didn't do it. So I'll say, using the same Nathan that didn't clean his room. Nathan, since he's helping video this today, I'll use him. So Nathan, come back here. And we'd go back to the room. And I would sit down on the bed, and they would stand there, and I would tell them, do you realize what you did? I never asked why you did it.
Right, because you're allowing them to justify their actions when you do that.
Never ask a kid why, because there is no reason why to do wrong. There is none. That's just a justification. What I ask is, do you realize what you did? And normally they'll tell you, but sometimes they were like, not really know. And so I say, no, this is what you did. In that case, we were clear. I gave you instructions. You flat out disobeyed me. And so now I'm going to have to correct you. And this is done out of love. There's no hollering. Because why? It's first time obedience. I'm not frustrated. I'm just going through the training process of being a parent. And so I'm like, okay, so look, this is what I'm going to do. I want you to lay over the bed. And again, it's in private. So I want you to lay over the bed. And what you can do is put their hands in front of them. They're laying over the bed, so their buttocks is here. You don't want to pull their pants down. That's not dignified. How you like someone pull your pants down and whip you on your bare butt? That's not how you do it. You wanna leave their pants on. A lot of times you can grab their hands because some of the kids are gonna try to fight because they're scared and all this. Where you may need the other parent in even to help you. And you hold their legs so they're not putting their hand and their legs in the way of the correction tool. And then when you go to the buttocks, because that's what the buttocks has the extra cushion for. It's for sitting and it's for getting a paddling. All right. And so when you come down, bam, and you hit with that strap, it's going to sting, and it's supposed to. Put it this way: if they have no reaction to it, you're probably not swinging it hard enough. Now, there are rare occasions when a kid just has a high tolerance of pain, and it doesn't mean you don't whip them, but you may have to whip them and also take freedoms and take some other things. You got to find out what causes that kid grief and pain, because it's grief and pain that gets the unrighteousness out of them and helps them respect you and go to the next level. So we'll whip the kid. Let's say for the room, I do 3 licks. And if you're swinging it hard enough, that's all you need. Again, practice on yourself and you'll know. All right, you can practice on your leg or on your buttocks, or have your spouse whip you and you'll really know, right? And so once you correct it, they will cry. And a lot of times I let them up, they fall on the floor, rubbing their tail. They get up. I just sit there and wait, and I let them cry for a little bit. And look, correcting takes time. So don't think you're going to, be in a hurry and doing all this. You just sit there. I let them cry for a little while, because the Lord lets us cry for a little while. And I let them cry. And then after a little while, and I say a little while, a couple of minutes, until I know the sting's gone. And then I say, okay, stand up. Now stand up before me. And I say, now,
Wait, then you say, okay, dry it up.
Yeah.
Dry it up.
I actually say dry it up. And you know why I say that? Because in the book of Hebrews, actually after God corrects you, towards the end of that scripture, it actually tells them to dry it up. I'm paraphrasing. But it says straighten your legs, straighten your knees, and it basically straighten up. You're okay. It's not the end of the world. But so I tell them, quit crying. They'll be sobbing. That's fine. And look, if they don't and they still acting up, I'll give them one warning. I say, okay, and this is that first time obedience. Okay, now look, if you don't get up and if you don't stand up in front of me so we can talk, I'm giving you another whipping. And I'm telling you, when you give them another whipping for that, because I've had to do that, the next time they will stand up and listen. And then we talk about how much I love them. And then we pray together, and they ask me to forgive them. And then they ask God to forgive them. And then I give them a hug. I tell them how much I love them, how much I appreciate them. And here's the big key, guys, big key. When we walk out of that room, it's over.
Yes, amen.
It's done.
Amen.
I treat them as if nothing happened.
Because that's how the Lord treats us in Psalms 103. He says, He removes our transgressions as far as the east is from the west. And we need to do the same with our children.
So you and look, now when I walk out of the room, I am going to go back through the process of saying, okay, let's sit down and talk about your room. And okay, I want you to clean your room, and I'm going to do the same thing. You got 20 minutes to do it, and we're going to go right back through the process. And I promise you, 99.9% of the time, they're going to clean that room. They're going to have it done in 10 minutes. And they're going to come out and hey, great job, man. Thank you so much for doing that. I appreciate you showing me respect and cleaning your room. Man, you doing a great job. I love you, man. And so it's very important that, correction starts with love, and then correction in the middle, which is love, really. And then, but the kindness and the forgiveness has to be on the back end.
Amen.
That has to be there. And I don't treat that kid like I treat him like nothing happened. You can't, 20 minutes later, holler at I can't believe you didn't clean your room. Don't do that. You're destroying what forgiveness is all about.
Amen.
And so in that age appropriate, going back to that, it may be taking the game. It may be doing something else.
Right.
But you always want to preserve the dignity. And so in correction, I think we covered a good bit here to help you out. I'm telling you guys, if you follow this, you and your relationship with your children are going to be amazing throughout your whole life. It's going to set you up for success for the rest of your life, for your relationship with your children. And what'll happen is, too, Cindy, your kids will always come to you for things. They'll respect your advice. They'll want to be around you. I mean, this is the right way to do it. You know that. You feel that in your spirit. You just got to get this, idea of the way you want to do things and realize what the scripture says and embrace it, trust it, and watch what will happen. And then we'll do the last thing is the moral reason why. Because it's important after we correct our children to talk about the moral reason why.
Yeah, and so it's very important in training your children. You want to tell them the moral reason why, your heart behind it, your thought process behind it. For instance, I bring my children to church. I'm going to tell Nathan, we'll use Nathan again as an example. I'm going to say, Nathan, don't run in church. Now, if I only tell him don't run in church, he really doesn't know why I'm telling him don't run in church. He doesn't know the why. So I say, Nathan, don't run in church. You see Miss Smith over there walking with the cane. If you run, you're going to make her nervous, and we don't want to make her nervous. And so we're teaching them the preciousness of others, but also why I don't want them to run in church. Because what happens if there's a fire alarm? The building is on fire. I'm going to want my son to run in church at that point, but then he's challenged, and so it's very important to give that moral reason why, why we do things, and also it puts it in their memory bank. Think of their memories as like little banks, and so when they come up to a situation, they're like, well, it might not be exactly how that last situation was, but because they know the reasoning why, they can decide and determine their action.
And the same thing, like if the cleaning of the room, hey, I want you to do this, and the reason is because as parents, this is our home, and we want our house overall to have a certain neatness to it. Even though that's your room, it still belongs to me. And when you clean your room, you're also obeying your parents, which the Bible talks about. When you obey your parents, it's the first commandment that has a promise to it that you'll have a long life. And so that's the reasons you want to do this. And it's going to make you feel better and be able to have more creativity and feel more relaxed because everything is clean.
And being a good steward of the blessings that God has given you.
Being a good steward. When people come over,
right.
You're not going to feel embarrassed because everything's all over the place. And so you explain those things and they get it. They really get it. So you want to explain the moral reason why. So look, this is a lot, but this is a great session. I know this is going to help you guys. And look, you have Woodshed Part 1, Woodshed Part 2. Make sure you go over those. You may need to watch them a couple of different times and watch them together as a couple. If you're a single parent, you watch it. I know it's more difficult because you'll be doing these things and possibly, the other parent will not be. But guess what? You'll be the one earning the respect of your child and showing real love to your child. Remember this, single parents. Real love is not letting them do what they want to do, trying to win them over. Real love is giving correction. And for all parents, real love is being able to correct. And even if you, I want to say this, kind of throw this out there, even if that is not your child, as far as, you married, say, your spouse, and that child belongs to your spouse and not you, you are still a parent. And you still, between you two, you guys talk about that correction and how that's going to go. But I want to say this as parents, and I said it in one of the other videos, it's hard if I have a child, well, let's say you had Sarah, I come into the picture, I didn't adopt Sarah till she was 6 years old. So I have, if you want me to be responsible, I also have to be able to correct. And so you allowed me to do that in a godly way. And look, blended family is a little bit different because you're dealing with another, another parent. And so you got to work through all that. And that takes a lot of communication. And so for you blended families, it may be where you're in a situation where the parent who is biological to the child has to be the one administering, especially the whipping. But where the other parent, depends on their age, because if they're a little bit older, it's going to be harder, where the other parent can administer maybe loss of freedom, can administer the sit down and the talk. And so I know you got to work through things on that, but it can work. By the grace of God, we can raise our children and really have them be pleasing to the Lord, be a blessing to other people around them and around us, and be a blessing to you as well. And so, guys, I hope this helped you. We love you. We'll have more videos coming out on parenting that I think is going to really help you. Cindy's going to come back, and she's going to do one just for moms. And so it's going to really help you guys. Maybe you can bring one of our girls that has, has children, Sarah, bring her in. That would be a good tag team for you guys talking through that. But I love you guys. I appreciate y'all. And I hope and I pray for your home to be at peace and for your children to be a blessing.